Feeling good? Yeah, you still awake out there. Our next presentation is on strategic use of generative AI. Our presenter is Professor Tracy Norton, a national leader in legal education, currently serving as Assistant Professor of Law at the LSU Paul Hebert Law Center. She has taught legal research and writing at LSU since 2022. Her distinguished career showcases a blend of innovative teaching, scholarly excellence, and visionary leadership in the integration of technology and neuroscience in legal education. She has recently emerged as a thought leader in incorporating generative AI literacy into law practice and education. Her presentations on the ethical use of AI, leveraging AI for storytelling, and crafting compelling human stories using AI have been well received by both lawyers and law professionals nationwide. Please welcome Ms. Tracy Norton.
All right, I am live. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I apologize for being late. That took me 40 minutes to go the 3 miles from LSU to here. So that was a lot of fun. All right, so here we go. So let's, hold on. There we go. So I like to start with my perspective on this because people have a lot of feelings about generative AI. For something that has no feelings itself, it generates a lot of feelings. So my perspective, first and foremost, is that generative AI is a tool. It's no different than anything else. A hammer is a tool, right? If you're trying to hang a picture, a hammer is great. If you're going to use it to bash in somebody's head, people have feelings about that also. And so it's not necessarily about the tool itself, it's about how it's used. And so no tool is categorically good or bad. A tool just is. Tools are most effective in the hands of the skilled. I guarantee you that when I use a hammer to hang a picture, it's very different than when someone skilled with a hammer hangs a picture. There's a different thing that happens there. It is my perspective that the highest and best use of technology is to give us more time to do the things that humans do best. And so creativity, relationship building, analytical thinking. Those are things that we excel at, and that for a myriad of reasons, some of which I'll talk about, we're not very successful in getting computers to do. And so it is my belief that generative AI, like all other technology, is best used to create more space in our day to do the things that humans do, not to do the things that are uniquely human, because it's not very good at those things. And so what I'd like you to start thinking about as we're talking today isn't how AI can do the principal functions of your job, but how AI can do the knucklehead stuff that drives you nuts and takes up your time and makes you feel like I'm never going to get to the stuff that matters because I'm doing this garbage all day. That's the kind of stuff that AI is actually very, very good at, and there are some great ways to do this. Now, generative AI is a technology that doesn't use coding. That's why it's so democratizing. Suddenly, everybody can build a chatbot or can code something. I do all kinds of things with computer code. I understand a little bit of Python now after a couple of years of having generative AI write Python code for me, but I don't know how to write Python code on my own. I can tinker with code that AI writes for me now, but that's all I can do. I can just tinker with it. And so the thing that's so democratizing is I can now program a computer using English. That's awesome. That opens up a world of possibilities to me because there are all kinds of things that I need to do in the course of a day that I would love to have a computer program or a computer app to do for me, but it's not important enough that it's worth me paying somebody to write that for me. And so if it's between me paying somebody and doing it myself, I'll just do it myself. But if it's between me being able to code and make it happen, that I will do. So this allows you to do some things probably that you've never even thought of. And there are, like any technology, at first it's like, well, why would I need that? Why do I need a cell phone, I thought in 1998. What am I going to do with a cell phone? I don't need to be that reachable. That was my dad's mantra until he died. I don't need to be that reachable. I don't ever want to be that important that you have to call me in the car. And now, I wouldn't leave the room without it. I don't go from the kitchen to the dining room without my phone. So like other technology, at first we can't figure out what on earth we would do with it. And then pretty quickly, once we figure out what it does and what it can do for us, we wouldn't live without it. That's where I am. I don't go a day without using AI just in my ordinary workday. Okay. So to be able to use it well, you need two things. You need some basic generative AI literacy. And so for some of you, if you've seen me speak before, I'm going to go over some things that I've talked about before. It never hurts. We learn everything in stages and layers. And so you'll get something new out of this that you haven't gotten before. And then this is the first time I've presented on, or the second time actually, that I've presented on prompt architecture. And so you hear a lot about prompt engineering. I don't like the term prompt engineering because I think prompting is a lot more, it's not just about sort of the engineering and the mechanics of how you put the words together. There's a lot of art to this also. And so the professions that deal with language, lawyers, professors of things like literature and communication, journalists, those folks who work with the language all the time, English is the new Python. English is the new coding language. And so if you are somebody who works with the nuance of language routinely, then you're going to be very good at this, but you need a framework. And that's what I'm going to give you today, is a framework to work within so that you can communicate with this technology effectively. So we'll start with basic generative AI literacy. So first of all, what is artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence is a field of computer engineering focused on creating systems that perform tasks about the way that we would expect humans to perform them. It involves the development of algorithms. Algorithms are just sets of instructions that are meant to accomplish a specific task. Algorithms can range from the very simple, alphabetize this, to the very complex, run this airplane while the pilot sits back and drinks some coffee. And algorithms are a part of life. You rely on algorithms to get you here. I guarantee you, had algorithms not been at work with the traffic lights between my office at LSU and the conference center here, things would have been much hairier than they already were. So algorithms make our days flow very smoothly. They work generally behind the scenes, but there are some that we engage with directly. So there are also human intelligence algorithms. So although an algorithm is a set of instructions meant to accomplish a task given to a computer, we use algorithms also. We have sets of instructions that we use to accomplish tasks. So algorithms don't have to be something that's hyper-technical and requires specific computer expertise to be able to use. We use algorithms. The alphabet is an algorithm. It's a set of instructions for organizing and categorizing information. I actually had a colleague yesterday. I just like to throw this stuff in because if you're not worried about the state of our youth, I want to make sure you leave here worried about them. These are upper-level law students taking a seminar. I don't know what the seminar was because I didn't want to ask, because if it was too relevant, I was going to burst into tears. And we're told that the first thing they had to do was turn in a bibliography alphabetized by author. And one of the students complained about the task and said, "I've never in my life had to alphabetize anything." Well, then you're kicked out of law school. What do you mean you've never had to alphabetize anything? And so I was so shocked, and I told my colleague, I said, I use alphabetizing as an example in my presentations of the simplest set of instructions that anyone can follow. I don't know, maybe I should share that graphic with her. Maybe they'll calm down a little bit. The Dewey Decimal System is a way of organizing information. A recipe is an algorithm. It's a set of instructions designed to accomplish a specific task, to wit, to produce a particular dish to eat. Building instructions, even when they don't have words, as in the IKEA building instructions, that is an algorithm. An algorithm doesn't have to use language. It can use computer language or it can use no language at all. If you have a morning routine, my husband is one of those people where the same things have to happen in the same order every day, or everybody just needs to give him, a lot of space until he can start over tomorrow. And so he is one of those people for whom an algorithm is necessary to get his day started. He's got to follow a set of instructions to the T in order for his day to get started. There are also complex computer algorithms that we engage with regularly. And so if anybody's got Duolingo on their phone that they're using to brush up on a language or to learn a language, if any of you have used the predictive text function in Word or in Outlook where you type and then it gives you the next few words, that's an algorithm. Google uses algorithms, different kinds of algorithms in generative AI, but it uses algorithms to do its work. Waze and Google Maps use algorithms. For example, as I was sitting in my car at a dead standstill in front of a house on Stanford Street, I could see exactly how long it was going to take me to get through the red part on the road, which does nothing to decrease my anxiety. But that's an algorithm. It responds to conditions as they exist in real time. Netflix. Netflix was the thing that made Netflix so great at the beginning. It came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, and originally it was a DVD delivery service back when we went to Blockbuster to get our DVDs. And the thing that was so great is that they would mail them to us. But beyond that, it was even better because when you went to Blockbuster, anybody who's old enough to have gone to Blockbuster knows that part of the process of Blockbuster was you just had to stand there for a while and just look at the wall of movies and think about what you might like. And then periodically you would wander about 2 feet and look some more. And every once in a while there would be like a, if you like this movie, try out this movie. And you're like, oh, thank God. Because it cut the process short. Well, the thing that was so great about Netflix was that it had a recommendation algorithm that was brand new. We'd never seen anything like it. You could rate any movie you had ever seen. They had the entire catalog. And so you could rate movies you didn't even get from them. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Very simple rating. And based on your rating, it would recommend movies to you. And so that cut out that process of having to sort of rock in front of the Blockbuster wall for a while. And so that was really something in the early 2000s. Now, of course, we are inundated with recommendations. Like, it's just constant. All of the ads that we see on the internet are specifically aimed at us. But that's an algorithm that did that recommendation. It's still an algorithm that serves us up those recommendations. So complex algorithms like these enable what we call machine learning. Now, machine learning is not like human learning. Machine learning is different. It's a much more rudimentary process. We don't really understand much about human learning. Psychologists and educators and neuroscientists study learning constantly. And so the fact is we just don't know that much about how our brain works and how humans learn. We're learning more all the time. And so machine learning isn't the same because we can't program it to do things that we don't yet know that we do. So when you hear machine learning, it's not like human learning, although computer scientists like to say, oh, it learns just like a human. And I always like to ask computer scientists, and how is that? And how do we learn? And they don't really know what that is. And I'm like, wow, that's something. You are programming it to do something that you don't yet understand. That is magic. But what they do is they take in large amounts of data and they categorize it. And based on the categorization, they can start to make some predictions, which we call learning. We use complex algorithms that are designed to identify patterns every day. All of these are simply designed to identify patterns and then replicate them for us. Therefore, artificial intelligence has already become a very useful part of everyday life, even though it's not predictive language or predictive image or predictive sound intelligence. It is still the kind of predictive intelligence that we've gotten really very familiar with. And so this is a difference in degree, it's not a difference in kind. So there are also complex embedded algorithms, and these are algorithms that we don't engage directly with. And complex embedded algorithms are something that we rely on all day, every day. And so your airbags run on embedded algorithms, traffic lights run on algorithms, autopilot on airplane, and lots of other airplane functions run on embedded algorithms. If you've got an Alexa or a Google Home or an iHome, that runs on embedded algorithms, but not generative AI. And what I hope that you'll see as we go through this time together is that we don't want these running on generative AI, because generative AI makes things up that aren't true. And so usually when we ask, like when I ask my Google Home a question, I want it to give me accurate information. How long should I bake a cake in a 9x9 pan? I don't want it to make up an answer. I'd like it to give me an actual answer. So these don't run on generative AI. They do run on other kinds of AI. So when they tell you, oh, your iHome is AI generative, not that kind of AI, Netflix kind of AI, Google kind of AI. And then your thermostat. Thermostats run on artificial intelligence. So there are types of artificial intelligence. The largest part of artificial intelligence, accounting for, and I'm going to make a number up, but I'm going to bet I'm pretty much on the money. I'm going to say 99.99% of artificial intelligence falls into this category of narrow or weak AI. The reason it's called narrow AI or weak AI is because they're specific algorithms designed to accomplish specific tasks. Rate all the movies you want and we'll give you a recommendation. You start writing an email and we'll predict the next 3 words after I hope this email, like everybody in here can finish that sentence, right? It's not magic. So it has machine learning capability, which means over time, the predictive text feature in Outlook will begin to sound more like you because it has taken in a lot of information about how you write. So it's got machine learning capability, which is really just the ability to predict statistically what comes next. But they do what they're told, right? Your Microsoft Outlook predictive text isn't one day going to start to complete your sentence with, hey, Bob, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a poet, right? So I'm going to leave you to write your own emails, and I'm going to go be a poet, right? It doesn't come up with its own agenda. It's designed to do what it's designed to do, and that's all that it can do. Now, some of them are designed to sound like they have their own agenda. Some of them are designed to sound like they have their own feelings, but they don't. That's just what they're designed to sound like. And so you can ask ChatGPT, would you rather be a poet or a GPT? And it'll give you an answer, and maybe it'll say it would rather be a poet, but that's not because it really knows what a poet is or cares. It's because that's a statistically likely response. So generative AI is a form of narrow AI. Now, I'm not saying that these GPTs aren't powerful. They're incredibly powerful. They do some amazing things for us, but they're doing tasks that, while for us are pretty complex, for them are not very complex. And so for us, the complexity comes with the fact that we simply can't take in and process the amount of information as quickly as they can because we're limited by time and space, right? I'm limited by the amount of things my eyes can see and the number of hours that I can stay awake and the amount of time that I can stay focused and interested. Computers aren't limited by those things. So they take in large amounts of data, and then they have algorithms that tell them what to do with that data. And so the algorithms for this particular kind of AI, which are called large language models, use human language rather than computer code as input and output. It's not really any different than any other algorithm. With the Netflix algorithm, you put in ratings and you get out recommendations. With this, you put in language and you get out language. But the middle part is still an algorithm. The outputs are original and they depend on the user input. They mimic creativity and thought through predicting expression of creativity and thought, right? So if you think about how do you know that someone's smart? How do you know? Anybody? How do you know somebody's smart? Vocabulary is one marker, right? But the smartness isn't in the vocabulary, right? But we make some assumptions based on vocabulary, based on how we learn and how we have acquired vocabulary. Well, this has also acquired vocabulary, but it doesn't know what it means. It doesn't have any idea what it means. It just knows what word is statistically likely to be used. And so while it seems smart, it's not smart the way we understand smart. While it seems creative, there's not the same thing behind it. And I say that because I know that we don't know what's behind our creativity. We don't know why, for example, a lot of folks that with learning disabilities, for example, my husband is profoundly, almost comically dyslexic. He's the smartest guy I've ever met in my life. He remembers every piece of information that has ever come in through his ear holes or his eye holes. He remembers all of it. Like he'll say something about, the Peloponnesian War, and I'll say, how in the world do you remember that? And he's like, 9th grade world history. And I'm like, yeah, I assure you the rest of us don't remember 9th grade world history. Like, I remember 9th grade world history was where I learned that trick that if you want to make sure you don't fall asleep in class, you hold a pencil down like this, and when you get really, really tired, the pencil will drop right before you fall asleep, thus keeping you from falling asleep in class. That's what I remember from 9th grade world history. But he remembers all of it, and so there's something about the dyslexic brain that allows him to remember everything. I don't have any idea how it works. But so there are features of how our brains work that we don't really understand, and what makes us smart, we don't really know. But we know about the expression of it, which is why when my husband was in kindergarten, he was put in special ed because they thought that he was learning impaired. They thought that he couldn't learn. And so they put him in special ed where he was for probably a year or two before they realized, oh, no, he's not learning impaired, he's dyslexic. But being able to read is important to being able to use language, right? We acquire a lot of language at that age through reading. He wasn't acquiring it through reading, so his vocabulary wasn't expanding. And so the things that are markers of intelligence, he wasn't displaying. Doesn't mean he was intelligent. It meant we didn't know how to kind of crack that code back in the 70s on, dyslexic kids. So this mimics creativity and thought and intelligence through the use of language. It doesn't mean it actually has creativity, thought, or intelligence. There is another category called general AI. General AI is the thing that people like to scare us with. In fact, I saw an article just a couple of days ago that said, should we stop pursuing general AI? And my position is you pursue it or you don't want to pursue it. Like, I don't care what you do. You're throwing money down a hole either way, but it's as good a hole to throw money into as any other, So why not? I'd buy yarn at Michael's. That's throwing money in a hole too. This isn't any better or worse than that hole. We're not going to get to general AI. General AI is artificial intelligence that develops its own motives, its own understanding, its own emotions, its own agenda. This is where we start thinking, it's going to be our robot overlords. That's not coming. It's not coming. We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to do it. And in fact, Sam Altman, who is the CEO and the founder of OpenAI, which is the company that made ChatGPT, Sam Altman recently, in his deal with Microsoft, sought to change the definition of general AI because as long as their deal said that when we reach general AI, Microsoft doesn't get a piece of that. that Microsoft gets a piece of whatever OpenAI does, that's part of our agreement together, as long as it's not general AI. But when it becomes general AI, Microsoft, you don't get a piece of that. That's all ours. Well, recently Sam Altman wanted to alter that agreement, not to say that they could have general AI or that they had reached general AI, but he realized they weren't getting anywhere near general AI, but they were getting near some pretty good stuff that was still not general AI. So he sought to change the definition of general AI. So he moved the goalpost and declared victory, right? We've reached general AI now, and it's different than what we said it was going to be, and you can't have any. They're going to be in litigation over that for the next 2 decades, I guarantee you. So anybody who tells you that they're scared of generative AI because it's going to be general AI doesn't understand what either one is. We're not about to get general AI. That's not happening. It's just not happening. And even if it is happening, it's not going to be in the lifetime of anybody in this room. Okay? And so none of you are going to have to worry about it, right? I have a colleague who said, that's a pretty bold statement to make in front of people. And I'm like, not people who are going to be dead before it happens. Like, I'm super comfortable telling you that, right? I'm also pretty comfortable saying we are not all going to be abducted into a huge tomato and taken to the planet of tomatoes. That's not happening either, right? All right, so there's no general AI. We don't have to worry about it. Don't let people freak you out. People always want to freak you out about stuff. Keep in mind, anytime somebody's trying to freak you out about something, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get your vote or your money, right? So if anybody's trying to freak you out about generative AI, they want your vote or your money. Tell them to go take a long walk off a short pier. So we're going to talk about generative AI, which again is a type of narrow AI. I find this very comforting. I think most people find this very comforting. It is narrow AI. It is weak AI. It only does what we can tell it to do. So narrow AI executes a specific task using an algorithm. For generative AI, the specific task is to generate something new using a large language model. Now, for our purposes today, we're just going to talk about language generation. We're not going to talk about image generation. We're not going to talk about voice generation or things like that. The technology is the same. It works the same way. But for our purposes, most of what we're concerned about right now is language generation. And if you understand the language generation, you can understand the other stuff later. So an I don't know how I did that. I want to stop doing that. Now I'm typing on it. It's, I know. Apparently PowerPoint now wants to be a search engine. Thank you. Okay, so an LLM, a large language model, which is the type of AI that we're talking about, a large language model is a deep learning model that takes raw data and learns, in quotation marks, to generate statistically probable outputs. If you learn nothing else today, you are trying to generate statistically probable outputs. Not the answer, statistically probable outputs. So for example, if I walk up to one of you ladies here in the front and I say, "How are you today?" Somebody give me what they believe a statistically likely response would be. "I'm good, how are you?" "Fine, thank you," right? There are a lot of statistically likely responses to that. Now, there's no particular right answer, except that I might ask one of them, and one of these ladies might say, judging from the way they're bundled up here in the front row, I'm a little chilly, and it's making me sleepy, frankly. So that may be true, but it's not statistically probable, right? So it's not going to give me that output, because that's not statistically probable, even if it's true. So the statistically likely output is not always the correct output, okay? The other thing that you noticed is that there are lots of different statistically likely outputs. "I'm fine, how are you?" "Good, thank you." "I'm well." Not too bad. So there are lots of almost equally statistically likely outputs to that question. And so that's also something you want to keep in mind when you're working with generative AI. That's why it can give you a different answer each time, because there are lots of statistically likely responses. They're not just one. So it's not looking for the truth, and it's not looking for the one expression of the truth. These specific deep learning models, called large language models, use a system of transformers in order to create outputs from inputs. And they do this through a system of encoders and decoders. And so let me break that down a little bit. Encoders help the model group words into categories. So for example, king, queen, prince, princess, we could put those into a category called royalty. And through the process of consuming all of this content, so for our purposes, just for simplicity, let's say the GPTs have read the internet, all of the internet. So in the process of doing that, one of the things that computers do very well is notice similarities and differences in things and group them into categories, right? That's a very common function for an algorithm, like the alphabet. The alphabet groups things into categories. The Dewey Decimal System groups things into categories. A recipe groups things into categories. There's instructions, there's ingredients, there's the mechanics of how to set the stove or the oven. So it takes all this information in and it groups it into categories. And so through processing all this information, it comes to understand, in quotation marks, that king, queen, prince, princess are in a category called royalty. What that means is when it sees the word royalty, it's often next to king, queen, prince, princess. And so it begins to associate those things into that category. So that is the process of encoding, and you have done it too. That's how you begin to learn things. You encode things as you learn them. You begin to put things into categories. This person came in a room, sat down quietly, drank a cup of coffee, and nobody said anything. Okay, that's probably okay behavior. Another person ran in naked and screaming, and they were hauled off by the cops. Okay, that's not good behavior. We don't want to do that. And so you begin to look at the world and process information and put things into categories and to govern yourself accordingly. Decoders help the model predict what words will come next. So if I have a placeholder for royalty and I have king, queen, prince, or princess in that placeholder, and the sentence is sits on A, and then I've got to fill in the blank, what's the answer? Throne, right? And so you know that because you also have processed a great deal of information. You have encoded the information, and then when you need to make a prediction, you decode the information. That's what this does. That's what this does. In not exactly the same way, but the same way. It takes the information, it processes it, it categorizes it, and then using those categories, it begins to predict what will come next in a sentence. So the encoding and the decoding happens in a deep neural network. And so this is a super simple diagram of a deep neural network. And so the first column is the input layer and the last column is the output layer. And in between that, you see these places where all of these connections are being made. That's where the encoding and the decoding is happening. And so what's unique about large language models is that the input layer is just language, not computer code. It's just language. The output layer is also language, but it's not extracted, right? So in Google, you input language and you get back results that are in language. But the language is extracted. You tell it the words you want it to look for, and it's going to go look for those words and bring them back to you, and then you're going to choose from the result. This isn't extractive technology. This is generative technology. So it takes the words, and then it predicts what would come next in a sequence with those words. And so the input layer is language, the output layer is language, but not extracted or retrieved, generated. So while we can't see inside those processes in the deep neural network, we can understand some of the simpler processes. And what I'm showing you now are some tools that linguists use to study language, to figure out not what the rules of language are, but what the actual practice of language looks like. Why has English evolved the way it has? How did English evolve differently after the English colonized the United States, or colonized America and made it the United States. How is English different in Long Island versus Baton Rouge? And so linguists study language to see how it's evolved and to predict where it's going and why it has evolved that way. And so they have a number of tools they can use to do that. And those are, we suspect. Now, we're never going to know for sure because Sam Altman is never going to tell us what's in that deep neural network, because then we just go make up our own. And people actually are doing that already. They're putting LLMs onto their own computers. And I'll talk a little bit, if we have time, about how you can do that. You can have an LLM on your own computer so that you don't have to worry about data being, leaked elsewhere. So we have tools already that help us break down language and then predict how it will be used. And so that's probably what's going on within the deep neural networks. So ChatGPT then is one of many large language models. And for our purposes, I'm just going to talk about ChatGPT, although I'll show you some examples that are also from Claude, which is the GPT from the company called Anthropic. Google also has a GPT called Gemini. Meta has one called Llama. There are lots of different GPTs. And ChatGPT is one specific brand name, right? So ChatGPT is a large language model. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So you can now understand what that GPT means. So generative, it predicts the next word in a series, right? Pre-trained, it's had access to large data sets that have been encoded and decoded. And then transformer is that process of the encoders doing their work in the algorithm and then outputting original language using the decoder. So generative pre-trained transformer, that's what the LLMs are. That's also what they do. So what was it exposed to in pre-training? Because when you think about the internet, you're like, wow, okay. So depending on what was the last thing you used on the internet, you might think, well, that's a bunch of garbage. Or you might think, well, that's impressive. And so I like to take a moment and pause and think about, well, what is on the internet? Well, there's a lot of really incredible medical, scientific, legal, artistic knowledge on the internet. The great thing about scholars, people who do what I do for a living, is that we already get a salary, right? And we don't get a different salary depending on how many articles we write or who has our articles or whether we give away the stuff or sell it. And in fact, if we sell it, usually the university is going to take it and then they're going to make the money off of it rather than us make the money off of it. C.E.G. Gatorade. And so academics love putting our work on the internet, right? Because if we're not going to make money off of it, let's just give it to everybody. Let everybody build on the knowledge. So there's tons of incredible knowledge and research available for free on the internet. There's also sort of some mundane places we spend our time. I spend a lot of time on Amazon. I spend a lot of time on Netflix. I spend a lot of time on a lot of sites that completely are sucking the life out of me. YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Twitch, Discord, all of those things. All of that is on there too, and it also processed all of that. Okay, fine. We are who we are. But there's also some dark web stuff going on, right? And so there is some of the social media that is full of vitriol and people tearing each other apart. There is a great deal, I don't know if you've heard, there's a great deal of porn on the internet. And there's the dark web where apparently you can hire somebody to kill somebody else. So that's all out there also. And then there's things like Tinder, where the people who are on Pornhub are trying to find other people who are on Pornhub so they can go out on dates with them, which I fully support. I think every pot has a lid. I think that's good. So that's what it was exposed to in pre-training. And so the training process, while impressive, can obviously be a little problematic, which of course, if you think about it, humanity is impressive, but also we're a little problematic, right? And so just because something is generated by a computer doesn't mean that it's unbiased or that it's neutral, because everything that went into the algorithm and everything that the algorithm processed is created by people. I want you to get an image, if you will, for a second, of people who write algorithms for computers for a living. Go ahead, see the person in your mind. I'll give you a head start on this image. They work in a cubicle. And so they're in a cubicle. And so get an image of that person. They are exactly who you think they are. They are exactly who you think they are. I don't mean that as a dig. I have several friends who are computer engineers. They're fine people, but they're exactly who you think they are. And so those are the people who write algorithms. Algorithms have a perspective, and they have the perspective of the people who are writing them. And those people, by and large, have a very specific life experience. I don't knock that. I have a very specific life experience. And so everything I write is informed by my life experience. But we do ourselves a disservice when we think that just because a computer generated it, it's somehow neutral or unbiased. That's absolutely not true. The pre-training material on the internet and the subsequent fine-tuning, that's also created by people. And so the things that are generated by ChatGPTs, that's us, right? The internet is us. And so the things that are generated, they are us. And so, like I said, impressive, but also problematic. So now I want to talk for a moment about the difference between a search algorithm and an LLM algorithm, because that is the most common mistake that people make. They want to try to use it like Google, and it doesn't work like Google. Now, a lot of the LLMs have built in some search functions. So for example, ChatGPT in the last few weeks has released what it calls its deep search function, so that in addition to using its large language model capabilities, it also will pair that with a search, a Google search or some sort of internet search. And so the answers get a little bit better, but as you're about to see, this does not solve the problems. We still have the same problems because it's still an LLM. So Google uses search algorithms. These are also narrow algorithms, and they are also meant to accomplish a specific task. And the specific task is searching for the language you give it, right? So they retrieve based on your input, and they give you site results, and then you sift through them. Has anybody ever looked at the number? There's a number that they give you. It's usually in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and it tells you how many hits your search got. And usually it's in the 1 million-ish range, right? And so you're not looking through all 1 million of those. Usually, if you've done a decent search, it's on the first page, right? If your search was a little wonky, maybe a little squishy, you didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, maybe your result is on the second page, or maybe you want results that are deeper into the search results. You do not want the 1 millionth page, though, and you're not going to get to the 1 millionth page. The point is, it gives you a ton of results. And when it gives you a ton of results, nobody has to tell you you have a decision to make, right? We just know, okay, there's all the results. I got a decision to make. And so you set upon making the decision. With large language model algorithms like that fuel things like ChatGPT, they are also meant to accomplish a specific task, but that is generating new text that is statistically likely to be responsive. It's not looking for those exact words. In fact, what it does is called tokenizing. It takes the words you put into the GPT, it turns those words into tokens, okay? I'm going to give you an analog. This isn't accurate, this isn't exactly right, but it's going to get us where we're going. Think of it like syllables. It's going to break it into syllables, and it's going to assign each syllable a number. And then it's going to, crunch its little numbers, and it's going to go into its processing and respond based on what other numbers do I often see around these numbers and these tokens. And then it's going to come back with tokens. It's going to turn those tokens back into syllables and words, and then that's what it's going to give you. That's not what you're doing in your brain, right? That's not what you're doing in your brain. And so there's some translation that goes on, and it's not like translating one language to another language. And so the processes in the back are not anything you would recognize as translation. It's tokenization. And so that's what's going on back there, trying to get a statistically probable outcome. So it also generates based on your input, its pre-training data, and the fine-tuning, and then it will give you text or image results, but you're only given one choice, right? And so when you ask a direct question, and somebody only gives you one choice, you assume that one choice is what? Yeah, it's the answer, right? If you say, what time does this end? And I say, 7 o'clock, you're going to think, first of all, oh, sweet Jesus, I can't. Because you're going to think I just gave you an answer, right? But if I said, could be 4:20, could be 6:10, could be 7:30. Now you're going to turn to somebody, okay, what time does this thing end, right? You're going to be like, I didn't need a choice, I needed an answer. So it only gives you one response. So our understanding of one response is, I got an answer, right? But you didn't get an answer. You just got one response. You can help yourself not get sort of seduced into the hallucinations by asking for more than one answer. When you give it a prompt, say, I would like 5 options to choose from. When you ask for an image, I'd like 3 options to choose from. I'd like 20 options, whatever you want. I'll ask it, when I use it for brainstorming, I'll say, give me 10 good ideas about how I could do whatever it is I want to do. Because I don't want one good idea, because that's going to feel like the answer to me, and I might go, oh, that's great. But ask it for more than one. If you're asking it to draft something, say I want 3 distinct drafts, and it'll give you 3 distinct drafts. And then you don't fall into that trap of, okay, well, I got the answer, here I go. So Google retrieves. And so I asked it this question, where can I watch the Oscars? The Oscars happened a little over a week ago. Where can I watch the Oscars? And this is what I got from Google, okay? So I had a lot of options. One of the options I had was the Oscars website on ABC, right? And so live Sunday, March 2nd, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. I felt pretty good about that answer because ABC has nothing to gain by telling me to go to the wrong place at the wrong time. I asked I asked Claude, sorry, not ChatGPT. Where can I watch the Oscars? The same question, and to make sure that I don't introduce errors into my experiment, I always cut and paste it directly from Google into the GPT, so I make sure I'm asking it the exact same thing. Where can I watch the Oscars? Well, it gave me a really nice narrative answer. The 97th Academy Awards, or the Oscars, will air on Sunday, March 9th on ABC. You can watch it through ABC Broadcast, ABC.com, the ABC app, live TV streaming. The red carpet pre-show typically starts a few hours before the main ceremony. To confirm exact broadcast times for your specific time zone, I'd recommend checking your local listings. It didn't tell me. I got the date wrong. It says look for the specific time for your time zone. So it didn't give me any hint, right? So it told me it was March the 9th, but it was actually March the 2nd, right? And so there's a lot being written right now about how, the GPTs are so good now. They don't make mistakes anymore. Yes, they do. This was last week. I asked it last week. And so and this is something where you would think, why would you lie to me? But it's not trying to tell you the truth, right? It's just trying to give you a statistically likely response. Is it statistically likely that it's March 9th over March 2nd? I don't know the exact calculus used to determine when the Oscars are, but my guess is that March 9th is as good a guess as March 2nd, and maybe the week before was as good a guess. But, so it wasn't trying to give me the truth, and indeed, it did not. So you've got to know what you want. Are you looking for your language and you just want to know where it can be found? Or are you looking for an expression of an idea that you can verify yourself? Those are two different things. Both of those are incredibly useful. I use them both every single day, but I don't use them interchangeably. So search algorithms fetch, GPTs generate, okay? So if you need the truth, search for it or look it up in a reputable source or ask somebody. I'd have been better off asking somebody than I would have using GPT. But if you're looking for a good expression of an idea, that's a great expression of the idea. That gave me a lot. Had that been true, that would have been a very helpful way to communicate that information, right? So the March 9th, that's a hallucination, and they are seductive in their level of detail and confidence. And so you got to know what you're looking for. There are lots of folks, and again, these folks are trying to sell you something. They're usually not trying to get a vote from you, but give them time. That will tell you, oh, our LLM, our product, our Lexis, our Westlaw, it doesn't hallucinate. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because if you've got a large product that is an LLM that only looks in certain things. So the Lexis and the Westlaw, and I don't mean to knock the products, they're good for what they do, but I don't think they do. I think the sales pitch is a little bit misleading. They tell you this is AI generation without hallucinations because it's looking only in our database for the answer. Well, the problem is no LLM is looking for the answer. No LLM is looking for the answer. They're looking for statistically likely. Now, do you narrow down statistically likely when you have it look in a database of cases that actually exist? Sure. But does that mean that you're going to get the answer? No. And so Lexis and Westlaw's products that, as I have used them, I'm not saying everybody's going to get this result, they have hallucinated on me many times. And so none of these are good for research because these aren't research tools. These aren't fetch tools. Lexis and Westlaw, as they exist now, just with a good Boolean search, that's how you do research. That's great research. You don't need the AI for this. Now for the generation, like, yeah, it's good. There's some things that the Lexis and the Westlaw AI do that are really cool, but it's not the research part. So generative AI doesn't understand truth and it doesn't understand reliability. It generates content that is statistically likely to be responsive. Remember, statistically likely, these ladies are fine, right? In reality, one of them's pretty cold, okay? And so you've got to think about, what do I want? Do I want statistically likely? Do I want the actual answer? Now think about the things you write in a day. A lot of what you need to write, you just need it to sound right? A lot of what we anguish over isn't the content, but it's the presentation of it. I want to be able to say that your agency didn't do so well in this audit. We can't find all of the money. You don't want to say that in a way that sounds like you're suggesting that something untoward happened. You just want to present some information and maybe have somebody respond to that. It can do that. It can present information. It can very delicate information, very tricky information, especially when you're dealing with lawyers and clients, when you're dealing with employers and employees. Anytime you're dealing with a power imbalance, the tone is always a little bit tricky, and we spend a lot of time working on that. And I know for myself, I spend an inordinate amount of time writing emails that are going to go to the dean, for example, or when I want to tell a senior colleague that, no, I'm not going to serve on your committee, or no, I'm not going to go to your charity event. And I want to just be able to say, because quite frankly, I'm autistic and I don't really care how it sounds. But I understand that other people do. I've figured that part out. And so I would like to just say, no, I'm not going. But I don't want to do that because I realize that is rude. And so I'll put it into ChatGPT. Here's what I was asked to do. My answer is no. I don't want to give a reason. I'm just no. And I'll have it generate a response for me. And the responses are always lovely. Just absolutely lovely. I'm like, oh my God, I like myself better after this. I think I'm much nicer. I don't really send anything out to students anymore because I don't know if you know this about the youth of our country. They get a little bit more sensitive every single year. And So just giving them instructions, they're like, why were your instructions so, and I can't remember I don't know, but they think being told to do something on time, they're like, what were you implying? Were you implying that I'm not going to turn anything on time? Like, dude, I was just telling you when it was due. It's not about your character. I had a student say something to me the other day about how I'm concerned now that I brought this to your attention that we're not going to have a good working relationship. And she was one where I just needed to tell her the truth. And I said, that's not how this works. I said, when I leave the building, I don't think about you guys. I don't think about you anymore. And you don't want me to. You don't want me stewing about you when I go home. That's gross and it's weird. And I said, and frankly, you shouldn't be thinking about me when you leave the building. You should just stop thinking about me when you leave the building. But I told her, I said, I don't think about you that way. But they think we do. And so when I draft something, instructions for students or an email to students, a clarification, whatever, to avoid it sounding too harsh to their delicate little ears, I'll run it through ChatGPT, and it has helped a lot. It really sort of greases the wheels with the students. So you can use it for things that need to sound correct, that you can verify whether they actually are correct. So don't use it for anything that's got to be accurate or reliable if you don't know the answer yourself, right? So it hallucinates, and that's what you've got to remember. When you're developing your relationship with this technology, you got to remember it hallucinates. I like to think of it like a benign psychopath, right? It's not going to kill you. It's not out to hurt anything, but it would just as soon tell you a lie as the truth. Those are equally viable alternatives to this psychopathic technology. And so think of it like a psychopath, right? And so psychopaths are very charming. Psychopaths get a lot done in a day, you know? Psychopaths get other people to do things for them in a day. And so having a little pocket psychopath, that's not a bad tool to have. And so think of this like your pocket psychopath. So I have developed what I and a colleague of mine, she gave me this analogy once, and I was like, that's it. That's perfect for this technology. I call it the marathon rule. When you're thinking about what to use it for and how to use it, think about a marathon. You can get help at the beginning of a marathon. People can sign you up, they can register you, they can give you those little numbers that you put on your little jersey, they can show you where the starting line is. They can do all of those things, and it doesn't take away from the essential marathonness of what it is that you're doing. Lizzie's bringing me some water, so I'm going to come over here and get the water. Thank you so much. So it doesn't take away from the essential marathonness of what you're doing just because you got help. Has anybody noticed that water bottles have become like Fort Knox? I don't know what they think is in here. Don't tell my mother or my orthodontist. Yeah. Okay. Water bottle technology has gone way downhill. Okay, you can get help at the end of a marathon. People can give you water. People can give you those little Mylar blankets. They can take your picture in front of your ending time. They can show you where you can go sit down. And that doesn't take away from the marathonness of the experience. You can get help with a marathon and still have run a marathon, right? However, if you get help in the middle of the marathon, with the primary task of the marathon, running, then you have no longer run a marathon, right? If you take a cab or you cut across a field, you're not running a marathon anymore. It's the same thing with this technology. If you use it for the essentials, the lawyering, the accounting, the administering, whatever it is that you do, if you use it for the essential functions of your job, unless your job is predicting text, then you're good to go. Use it for everything. But if you're using it for the essential functions of the job, you're not doing the job anymore. Now, you want to use it as an adjunct. You're going to be a better lawyer, accountant, auditor, administrator. You're going to be better at all those things if you know how to use generative AI to help you with your job, to help you with some functions in your life. But you can't substitute it for the essential functions, which is good news, right? Because we all sunk a lot of money into a lot of education to get these jobs, and it would be a shame to find out that was unnecessary, right? That would really be a shame for me because my job is training other people to do the job. And if it turns out that the training is obsolete, I am screwed in any number of ways. So the good news for professionals is it's not going to take your job, but somebody who uses it well will take your job. And so you want to be aware of that. Okay, so what is it good for? If we're talking about using it at the beginning and the end, what would you want to use it for? Well, it's good for brainstorming. I asked it for a picture of a brainstorm. This is what I got. It's good, and this is my favorite thing. I ask it for so that all of my AI generated pictures have a similar sort of look to them. I always ask for colored pencil sketches or colored pencil drawings. And I haven't figured out a way to get it to stop putting colored pencils in the drawings. So you'll notice if you look at all of the drawings in the slideshow, somewhere there's a colored pencil in there because it does them in the style of a colored pencil with some colored pencils. So you can use it for brainstorming. You can use it for drafting by genre. You can use it for bespoke revision. It knows the difference. For example, if you upload a report and ask it to write a cover letter for the report, it'll do a very good job of that. If you ask it to then take the report and instead write an email to attach the report, it'll do something different because it knows that the genre of email is different than the genre of letter. If you ask it to write a summary of the report, it will do something different. And so it's very good at taking information that you can upload to it or that you can give it and then doing it in a lot of different forms. And that's a lot of jobs require that. Like, I've got to do the report, then I've got to do the executive summary, and then I've got to do the presentation in the board meeting, and then I've got to do the email and the letter and the blah, blah, blah. And it's all based on this one thing. Now, are those exceptionally arduous tasks? No. But do they take up your time? Yes. Yes. Oh, bespoke revision. If writing is part of your job on a regular basis, you already know sort of what your little writing foibles are that you always have to check for in revision. I have a prompt that I've written that checks for the things in my revision so that I don't have to rewrite it every single time. I just say, do this. And so it's like my own little sort of personal Grammarly that it'll check for exactly what I want it to check for, because there are a lot of things that I don't want it to fix, things that technically maybe could be fixed in my writing, but that I like them, that are part of my voice in my writing, and so I don't want them to change it. And so I can do some bespoke revision. The other thing is I can ask it to not revise for me, but I can ask it to identify. So for example, I'd like you to identify the topic sentence of every paragraph and give me a chart that shows me where it is. Because one of my things is the topic sentence is always like second to last sentence or something like that. Like I kind of wind my way up to the point, and then if I move it, now the paragraph makes a lot more sense. So I'll have it locate that for me and then show me in a chart, here's where it is, here's where I'd suggest putting it. Or here's where it is, here's the revision I would suggest, and then I would suggest putting it there. So it gives me some options. What tasks involve wording things or accessing norms? I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is just a list of things that I generated on my own that I know that professionals do a lot of and that most of us hate doing. And so I put them into a couple of categories. And so these are tasks where we know when we've got a good response from the GPT, we just need some help kind of getting forward, getting past what we call the tyranny of the blank page. So emails and letters, networking emails, if there's a misunderstanding, there is no misunderstanding through an email that I can't make worse through another email. And so if I get an email where there's clearly been a misunderstanding and somebody's mad at me because they didn't understand something I did, or something I said, then I know from experience. I can, and I'm 56 years old. This is just how I turned out. This is just how I turned out. And so this helps me write those emails without having to admit to people, this is just how I turned out. I just write bad emails. Sorry. So misunderstandings, thank yous. Oh my God. I've been writing thank you notes since I'm 4 years old. And I sit there and I'm like, thank you for the X. And then I'm like, I don't know, man. It was a bottle of wine. I don't drink wine. I don't know what to say. I wish you had taken your wine with you when you left my house. I don't know what to say. So it helps with thank yous. Declining requests or offers, complex explanation or instruction, sensitive topics, apologies, recommendations. Planning, any kind of planning, it'll break it down for you. There's an AI app called Goblin Tools. Goblin, Goblin, Tools. If you have ADD or ADHD in any way whatsoever, Goblin Tools is great, because one of the things that my neurodivergent students struggle with, and I used to, I've learned very late in life that I have both ADHD and autism, and I was like, too late now. But what my students struggle with is taking a complex task and breaking it down into smaller tasks so that they can handle it and not procrastinate it. If you will tell Goblin Tools what huge behemoth task you're avoiding, it'll break it down into smaller tasks for you. It's brilliant at it, specifically for people who are neurodivergent, including autistic and ADHD. And so it also helps a lot with tone, because autistic people have a lot of trouble with tone. So any kind of this big stuff it will help with, and then Goblin will help you break it down into smaller steps. Content creation, training and education for new employees, marketing content, workflow automation, blog content, anything like that. It's really awesome at it. Okay, but you have to know how to talk to it. And so I'm going to give you a quick and dirty on how to speak to it with prompt architecture. And so I'm going to give you a framework. You're not going to learn this framework in the next 10 minutes. You weren't going to learn it if traffic had been better in whatever time we had to talk about it. It's something that you're going to have to sit with. So you've got the slides available to you, and if you want to talk to me about this, you should have my contact information. It'll be on my last slide. You are welcome to contact me. I'm happy to talk to you on the phone. I'm happy to get on Zoom with you. I'm happy for you to come to my office if you want. I'm happy to come to your office as long as it's not on Perkins. So here are the components of prompt architecture. This is the vocabulary that you're going to see. The rhetorical situation is the large framework. The scaffold is sort of the planning, the prompt planning that we put the rhetorical situation into. And then the prompt is broken down into modules, variables, and prompt stacks. Okay, so you're going to see this vocabulary. So the rhetorical situation, I call this power steering for communication. It's been around literally for centuries. And so anytime you're planning writing, you put yourself in the best position to do a good job when you spend a couple minutes thinking about, what do you know about the author? That's you. What do you know about the audience? What do you know about the subject? And for the author, it could be, for prompt purposes, not you, but the ideal author. If you were the ideal author for this letter, report, email, whatever, if you were the ideal author, what characteristics would you have? The exigence is where the author and the subject meet, which is why are you writing about the subject now? The purpose is where the author and the audience meet. What does the writer want from the audience? And then the genre is where the subject and the audience meet. How is the subject going to be presented to the audience? So you identify those 6 things. Now, this is the scaffold that I told you about. So this has got those 6 things broken down into just one page. And so each part of the rhetorical situation is a module, okay? So each box is a module, okay? And you can call them whatever you want. There's no magic to calling them modules. You can call them boxes if you want. It's fine with me. You can call them monkeys. I don't care what you call them. So each one of those is a module, and each module is going to get a prompt stack, okay? So, hold on. So for each module, you're going to develop a set of variables that tells you about that part of the rhetorical situation. So for audience, for example, You might want variables for demographics, age, location, income level, professional background, education, occupation, years of experience. Pain points, what are their primary challenges and frustrations, short and long-term goals, where they seek advice and solutions, what convinces them to act, how they measure satisfaction. And so you can take each one of these modules and fill it with a prompt stack. And so you'll notice that each stack starts with the name of the module and a colon, and then the bottom is a backslash or a slash and the module name again. That tells the GPT all of this information goes together, okay? So you've got 6 categories, and you want to come up with descriptions for each of those categories. Then you're going to take those categories, and this is Claude that I did this in, and you're just going to take each of those prompt stacks and you're going to stack them on top of each other, okay? So this isn't just rambling narrative, please do this for me. This is very targeted. I'll execute my prompt stack then with a final building instruction. So I'm going to put that architecture into the prompt window, and then I'm going to finish it off with a building instruction. And it's going to look like this. I'm not going to fill in anything for author or audience or subject. It's going to pull that information from my prompt stacks. Okay? So, acting as author, please draft genre to audience about subject for purpose and exigence. That's a good multi-purpose instruction that you can use. That one's not going to do you wrong. So let's take a closer look at how you can develop those modules, those descriptions, using the GPT. Okay, so this is the audience prompt stack that I showed you just a second ago. These are all the characteristics. These are the variables that I want to identify for this audience. You can use whatever variables you want, like job title, number of years in job, whatever it is you want that helps define that audience for you. You can put that in there. So this is the prompt stack for audience. So this prompt stacking, if you want more ideas about prompt stacking and variables, this book, Ingrain AI, comes out later this month. You can get it on Amazon. It's by a guy named John Munsell, and I worked with John Munsell to develop sort of part of this prompt architecture structure that I use. And so John is the one that taught me about prompt stacks. And so there's a lot of information in that book if you want to get more into prompt stacking. Now his is for marketing and business. For some of you, that's right up your alley. For others of you, you can see the applications of it. So the GPTs can help with the variables. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that prompt stack with nothing filled in. And I'm going to say, fill in the fields for each variable using the attached biography. I took my biography off of the LSU Law website and I just uploaded it here. And I said, I want you to fill in the variables for me. And it did. Demographics, mid-career academic professional, likely 40s to 50s, based in Louisiana, middle to upper middle professional income level, typical law professors, JD from Baylor University. It's got all the stuff in there, and it was dead on. It was dead on. And all of that wasn't in my biography. All that wasn't in there. And so, but it made a lot of assumptions based on what was in my biography. So it did a great job. So now, anytime I'm going to send something to this person, I've got this prompt stack, right? Or somebody like this person. Now I know how to generate a new one. And so I don't have to redo this every time I send a report to Tracy Norton, right? I've already got my prompt stack for Tracy Norton. So I'll finish with the final building instructor. Again, I've got that basic instruction that I showed you guys. Whoops. Okay. So through that process, you can take the same variables and you can just have this in an Excel spreadsheet or in a Notion database or in a Microsoft Word document, whatever you want. And then every time you write to this kind of person or this specific person, you've got your prompt stack, right? because you're going to do a lot of writing if you're going to use generative AI. And remember, it's English in, English out. I mean, assuming it also does other languages. I'm assuming we're doing English in, English out. So English in, English out. So the more nuanced your English in is, the more nuanced your English out is, okay? So you can also do a quick and dirty prompt. You don't have to do the architecture. You can just do the instruction at the end and just fill in each thing. And so that's what I've done here. So acting as a senior legislative auditor, so author, draft a letter to the Ombudsman of the North Louisiana Pilotage Fee Commission. So that's the audience. The genre is letter. The subject is the attached report. The reason for the report was it was produced at the request of the commission, and then the purpose of it is to audit the 2023 financial statements. So you can do a quick and dirty one with the rhetorical situation also. It identifies all the things you need to have. And so you spend more time thinking about the rhetorical situation of what you're going to write, and then less time actually writing it. And then you can reuse these over and over and over again. And so my recommendation is that you build these for the future, that you have a place that you keep track of your prompts. So we write in a lot of common roles for a lot of common audiences, purposes, etc. So rather than redraft a full prompt every time you use generative AI, create those modular prompt stacks, and then build a library, and you can put it, like I said, Excel or Notion, either one. And if this is something you'd like to talk more about how to keep track of them, I can show you. I'm happy to get on Zoom with anybody and show you like my Notion library where I have prompts that I use. Hold on to my email address if you want to talk to me about anything. Like I said, I'm always happy to connect and talk about this. Thank you very much for your attention today.